you see people during times of low transaction volume put their hands up, and it just can't be that way. You've got to stay in the game, build relationships, optimize your portfolio, and then when deals do come, you're ready. Welcome to another episode of the 0 to 100 podcast show. Our guest today, we don't have a guest today. Our guest rescheduled. And so I am here today with Mitchell England and possibly Travis Dillard if he could figure out his camera and microphone. Oh, I know. I see. So welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast show. Yeah, I think we're going to hand it off to Travis actually to introduce since he joined a little late, to introduce our guest, which is just audio only. Travis, do you want to introduce our guest today?
Yeah, sure. The guest today, it's me as the host, and I'm going to be interviewing you two.
Well, we got Mitch England back from the Midwest, back joining us in the Pacific Northwest. So we're neighbors again. You and Travis are more like actual neighbors. So welcome back. Yeah, it's good to be back. I love the Northwest. But the Midwest was good. Found some good opportunities, made some good connections, got to be there for my family. So, but yeah, there's nothing like you pull in from the east into the Columbia Gorge. You're just like, oh my God, this place is unreal. So I'm excited. It's going to be a big year. Yeah. Well, speaking of it being a big year, it is 2025 now. This is our first episode we've recorded in 25. No, yeah. We recorded.
Oh, we had one more.
That was our second episode.
Yeah.
Second episode of 2025. So maybe we talk about 25. I'm curious. What do you guys have kind of in the works, Travis, Mitch, for this year, for 2025? Yeah, I think 2025 is interesting. You know, we had an interest rate disaster last year. I don't know if you want to call it that, but basically a gridlock. I think a standoff is a good way to put it. Again, there's always deals, right? There's always deals to be made because it's such an inefficient market. But overall, I think that tightened things up. There's a big delta between what people want to pay and what sellers wanted to sell it for. I think this year is different. I think we have a new administration. We have a new, different momentum. I think that sellers are more realistic. Interest rates have come down a little bit. We'll see what happens next. It's kind of, I don't want to predict anything, but it looks like things could come down some more. We'll see. And so I think that there's more deals to be made. Also, if you think about it, sellers have taken entire last year and the better part of the year before holding tight. Life's changed. People need to retire. People want to relocate money. They want to reallocate and change, minimize their portfolio. So like, I believe 2025 is going to be pretty ripe with deals, and people are ready to make deals. And I've seen that, like talking to sellers, talking to brokers. It's only so long that the standoff sort of can exist. And so I'm excited. I think that this year is one of those years where, and this should be every year, but I think this year especially is one of those years where you look at properties, you look at deals, and instead of passing on them, you're going, oh, that's not going to work, or the cap rate's too low, or this is about whatever. I think taking some time to really ask the question, how do you make it work? And we talk about this all the time. Deals are not found, they're made. And so that's all about getting in the numbers, looking at not just the price, but the terms, the interest rate, thinking about seller financing, getting creative in that way. And so I'm very, very bullish for 2025. I think this is going to be a lot different than even last year. And I know, Gabe, you talked about it the other day, like you went a full year, I think, without buying anything. And I think we bought a couple deals, but we had a slow year. I think some of the investors know when not to buy too, and know when, being patient and playing sniper is really, really, really important. And if there's no deals, then don't do anything. But I think this year's going to be great. So long-winded answer, man. What about you? What do you think? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I do think it's always a good time to, if you buy right, that being said, I like the idea of patience, but it's not complacent. It's actively patient. You'll hear me use that term a lot. And I say actively patient because it's not sitting on the sidelines. It's not doing nothing. I will never stop building relationships and looking at deals and considering deals and making offers. But it's more about
as you said, like being a sniper, for me to take down a deal today, I want it to be a financially impactful deal. I want it to be as close to a home run, if not a home run as possible. And I can be patient. And that doesn't mean that I'm not doing the things. I'm not trusting the process. I'm being a little bit more picky about my deals. I want great deals. And it's also about pulling levers. I mean, I've been investing now for 20 years, and it's also like, what moves can I make with inside my portfolio, with inside my business? And I've made some shifts. So at the end of 2024, I ended up with 4 properties back. So 13 units that I sell or finance to a couple. I ended up with those properties back. Had some properties I was going to sell. I decided to hold on to those. And then I just kind of made some small moves internally. My only W-2 employee who runs my RV park, I've moved him here locally for the winter months because, he's basically going to be doing all my maintenance and repair stuff on my local properties, and I'll be ran through the property management that I have here locally. So he's been such an asset to my RV park, but the peak season of that park is really those summer months. And so I actually gave him a decent raise, but it's actually going to save me a lot of money because it's challenging for my property managers to always find good laborers and good contractors. And so he's going to be able to take a lot of that stuff. And so it's going to be a net benefit to him, a net benefit to my property manager, and then of course to me as well, because he's on salary. And so, and the guy likes to be busy. And so I'm just looking like within my portfolio, what moves can I make to just better my overall life and my overall business?
I love that. And I think that people forget, we get focused on what can I buy next? What's the next investment? What's the next deal? Which is great. But looking inside your own portfolio for gold, whether that's, revenue drivers, cost takeouts, that's, creating efficiencies, like you said, basically you're taking a manager from one slow park during one season and using him in another, which is just adding efficiencies to your business. So I think that's interesting. We talk about that in the elite mastermind as well. When you don't have a deal on the table, always keep looking, but also turn around and don't forget, your current portfolio probably has levers, and not only revenue drivers, expense takeouts, but also what's your return on equity? Could that be relocated? Is it time for a sale? Potentially, we don't love to sell, but or refinance. How do you go? What do your operations look like? Do you have the right people? Do you have the right who's operating? The right people on the bus in the right seat, all of that. And so I think there's always things to do. You mentioned also quickly building relationships during times when there's not a lot of deals. You've got to keep planting seeds, because those seeds, you will harvest those seeds, and building relationships is you talk about it all the time. It's what it's all about. It's literally this is a people business, and so you see people during times of low transaction volume sort of put their hands up, and it just can't be that way. You've got to stay in the game, build relationships, optimize your portfolio, and then when deals do come, you're ready. So I love that.
So Mitch, you mentioned knowing when to sell and knowing when to hold properties. And I think that's interesting because, we're always talking about long-term hold cash flow real estate. But I think I was sort of kind of going through what were some of the lessons learned over 2024? Obviously, we've talked a million times, don't invest with dumbasses. But also, I think something that you and I have been looking at in our own portfolios as we're planning for 2025, we're looking at, assets that we've held for a while, and what's the upside over the next, say, 5 years? Are we top of markets for rent? Is there a lot of room for rents? What's the debt? And a lot of the properties we buy, we add the most amount of value through forced appreciation within the first 12 to 24 months, millions of dollars, right? Because we're buying under optimized properties. Once you optimize them, you add a ton of equity, but it's sort of slower growth. So that's a question for you guys, really more anecdotally. Do you look at properties and then at times exit them? We're looking at some of our stuff going, man, this mobile home park is in an area that's probably can't absorb much more in rent raises. There's a lot of equity in it. We could probably roll the equity out of that property and add a lot more cash flow to our portfolio. And we talk about sometimes slow money is dead money and the velocity of capital. Yeah, I'd be curious. I know you and I and Mitch are kind of on the same page. I think out of our portfolio, there might be a couple we need to prune, or maybe you've taken the depreciation benefits, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you've exceeded sort of the breakup fee with the bank. and now it's a slower move. Now you can reposition that equity. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
So it's always a conversation I have with myself, or I guess in your guys' case, since you're business partners, probably a conversation you continually have or should have. The first 10 years, 11 years of investing, I sold nothing. In fact, my entire investment philosophy was buy, hold, cash flow first, right? The first property, so I bought my first property in 2005. I didn't sell my first property until it was either 2016 or 2018, right? And the reason was I built up a little bit of equity. It wasn't a lot, but it was just a really, really challenging property, and I really didn't have the funds for the CapEx stuff at the time. And I sold it, made a little bit of money, and but still, my philosophy of like buy and hold till it didn't change. But then, as I shared with you guys, and I know I shared this also at our in-person mastermind, that I had someone in my life mention like, hey, if you have 10 years, if you can get 10 years worth of cash flow in a day, meaning if you sell the property, and I shared this before, and I'm looking at my portfolio going, wow, I have so many properties where there's 10 years of cash flow, 20 years of cash flow. And I always go back and forth. So I don't think it's a right or wrong, but I think it's something to always consider. I have properties where I'm like, well, shit, should I sell this? There's so much equity, but the cash flow is good. It's a strong asset. And I believe in this property over time. And so I think fundamentally, I still very much believe buy and hold cash flow real estate. Now, if you're going to sell a property, what I like to call dead equity, like if I'm going to take that equity and put it into another property, it's going to return not only a much greater return, but just a larger net benefit, typically cash flow, like a larger cash flow play, then it's something to definitely consider. Where I see, some people doing it all the time, where it's just becomes the game, where it's like buy, create equity, sell. I don't think it's a right or wrong. I think but it is something that you should consider and think about in a conversation that you should have within and throughout your investing journey.
Well, I think on one side of the pendulum, you have a flipper, like you talked about. On the other side of the pendulum, you have buy and never sell anything. And I do think that there's probably room to create a hybrid. I think that when you look at our portfolio and our thesis, it's probably, when you really, we're evaluating, we're changing over time, but we're probably like 90-10, 80-20 hold to sell. It is interesting though, looking at some of the assets going, look, in the first 2 years, we've really force appreciated this in a impactful way. But year 3 plus, yes, it's going to grow. Yes, there's debt pay down. Yes, there's benefits there, but the money slows down. We were kind of evaluating our portfolio. The speed of the growth slows down significantly. Like after 2 years not on all of them, but on one of our properties specifically. So then I think the question to ask is, do you have a place to relocate that money to then go to get a lot faster growth? And you said that, Gabe, like, I think that's the question as an investor. Now, if you sell that property, you take a little hit from brokerage fees and, depreciation, recapture, that kind of stuff, and then you put it in a money market account. I'm not sure that's a great argument, but can you put it somewhere else and you're confident about putting somewhere else where you can again grow that capital very quickly? A good example is we had our CEO bought in this year into our company. And so she actually bought some of the shares of our company. So each of us got kind of a payout. Well, I rolled that payout right into a mobile home park. It's extremely fast growth over the next 2 years. It's already almost doubled that money. And so like I basically took very slow equity in our current portfolio, relocated into very fast equity, and I've actually made more money than if I wouldn't have done that. So I do think there's an argument for like selling or refi. It's just really understanding, do you have a better place to put that? And what's the opportunity cost of holding that very slow asset?
Yeah, beyond financial engineering, I can roll this equity. I can then roll it into another asset that allows me to grow even faster. So you're right. I think Mitch and I kind of have this, like, the guys that are, or girls, the people that are really growing their equity, maybe it's like buy 2, buy 5, sell 1, buy 4, sell 1, but the net is hold and growing your portfolio over time. That's how you build a legacy. There's also just the non-financial reasons you want to sell a property. I don't know. There could be properties that are a giant, big, fat pain in the ass. And then this is all about lifestyle design, right? So if it's a pain in the ass, then there's a lot of movement and you're constantly having to address issues in the property. Maybe the area is kind of a challenge. Maybe it's time to exit the property anyway, just because it's conflicting with lifestyle.
That's a really good point. We have a property that like has basically hit, we force appreciate it. Now it's at the slow growth phase, right? It's paying down debt. It's very, very slow rent increases. I mean, we're basically at market. I think this year was like $12 or something. We're there. And so, and that property's taken us a decent amount of time. So that's an interesting thesis where it's like, hey, the property takes you a decent amount of time compared to the other assets, and it's already at its top. There might be an argument there to exit and go relocate that capital.
Yeah, I just think it's always, I try not to have a fixed mindset on anything. There's things about investing that I, fundamentally believe, but I try to keep an open mind. I think it's important to question our own beliefs. I mean, I try to do them outside of real estate as well. I try to learn from other investors. I try to learn from my own successes and my own challenges and mistakes. And I think, at the end of the day, it does come down to like, if you're investing in real estate, what is it that you're trying to have that real estate do for you? How are you trying to have that real estate benefit your life? And, to Travis's point, if it's for lifestyle, then those properties need to support that. We've said this a million times. Like, a lot of people get into real estate investing because they want financial freedom. They want that time freedom, and they end up creating another job, or sometimes reach 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs, and they're working so much. And that's not why they got into real estate. So I think the alignment piece is really, really important. And not just taking down deals to be taking down deals. And I'm guilty of that. Like, there's been periods of time where I'm just focused on buying as many deals as possible. And I think there's some value to that. And there's other times where it's like, how do I add value? How do I increase value? How do I increase NOI, increase my cash flow, decrease expenses? How do I do those things within the portfolio that I currently have? But I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't own a bunch of real estate, right? And so it's like, you still have to take down deals at the end of the day. But once you establish yourself and you have a portfolio of real estate, then oftentimes it's looking within your current portfolio of what you can do. And sure, maybe sometimes that is to sell a property, or it is to refi a property, and maybe it's literally to do nothing, right? And sometimes doing nothing is the best thing that you can do in terms of what to do with a specific property.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like, I'm mindful as many properties as I can, or I'm not. Like, you guys have any personal or professional goals? Well, I should say professional around real estate for 2025. Gabe, I know we were talking, I don't know where we were talking, but I think it was one of our elites was kind of frustrated because they hadn't bought a property. One of our newer elites, they hadn't got started. And, not for a lack of trying, man. These girls are awesome. And they've been in contract on several properties that checked out when it came to the analysis, but for whatever reason, the seller was an asshole or things didn't work out. Anyway, but they were frustrated, and Gabe had said something to the tune of like, I haven't bought a property at all in 2024. And I think Dish and I, we bought 3 mobile home parks for a total of 104 units. But I think before that, it was like 15 months or a year and a half before we had bought anything. So do you guys... I know Mitch and I have actually, we're bringing our CEO in, or we're going to have some goal planning later this week. But so we'll probably outline that, but maybe it's good to sort of brainstorm that live on the air without my damn camera. But Gabe, do you have goals this year? Are you going to take down a certain type of asset class, the number of units, square footage, or are you just saying like whatever comes my way and I'll play sniper?
Yeah, my focus really is to optimize my current portfolio the best I can. So that's something I'm really looking at. How do I optimize what I currently have? If I choose to sell off some properties, it will be some of my smaller multifamily properties that have significant equity, and I'll roll that into larger triple net stuff. I've looked at and been in contract in multiple commercial deals in 2024, but at the end of the day, I felt like I would be taking them down to stake down another deal. And again, I am using Mitchell's words, I'm trying to be a sniper. I want to take down the best of the best deals. So I don't want to get so fixated on, like I have to take down this many tens of millions of dollars worth of real estate or this many units. The focus is how do I optimize what I currently have? And if I do choose to sell, I want to be making sure that I'm taking down something that's financially impactful in my life.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You also mentioned just trying to optimize your portfolio. I know one thing Mitch and I are going through. Another question I was going to ask is like lessons learned in life and or just like the last year. And I think one of the lessons we've learned is, you know, we have people that work for us. We have asset managers. They're running the properties. They're making sure rent's collected. They're making sure they're doing their weekly calls with managers and things like that. But I think one of the lessons I learned, and I'm going to roundabout way getting into optimizing properties. One of the things I think probably Mitch and I have learned, probably me more than Mitch, because I learned things that's just sort of stuck in his ways, you know, but is you own the property. It's your job to go in and make sure you're setting the strategic direction for those properties. It doesn't take a lot of time, but for example, we went into one of our properties and, you know, our asset manager's been like a $25 rent raise, $10 rent raise, just sort of like this. There was no data behind that. And we go in this is actually the Malone Park we go in the longest. We're going in going, damn, we kind of lost. We haven't kept our finger on the pulse on this property. It's $150 under rent, which is probably what's the math? You know, $100 times 40 units, you know, times 12, take a collection loss divided by a cap rate. Damn, do the math. We're probably several $100,000, if not, you know, nearing 6 figures or 7 figures of undervalue on this thing. And more like, you know, but that's on us, man. Like we should go through our properties every year. We should be doing the market assessment, or maybe you hire that out to a VA or somebody. But it's up to you to look at it and go, yeah, we need to be making sure we're optimizing this. So talking about that, we're going through all of our properties and doing that drill. There's a lot of money there that we're probably not capturing.
And that's where those conversations are important, because that's going to be the most cost-effective way to increase NOI and increase the value of an existing portfolio is where can you optimize and decrease expenses and where can you increase revenue? You know, and it's a conversation I have with my property managers every year. Like I want to be aggressive on rents without pricing my tenants out, right? And so when there's room and you're bumping rents up, you know, say on 100, 200, 300 tenants, even a small increase could be significant to the NOI. And that's going to be in some ways the greatest return, because it doesn't cost you any money versus deploying it into necessarily another deal.
I think the best deal often exists inside your portfolio, like right under your nose, especially if you haven't been sort of, you know, keeping pulse. And I don't think we've done a great job at that, but it's also good. There's upside there, right? We can look and go, look, with a few minor changes, we can lift our portfolio by probably over $1 million. And so anyway, looking backwards and looking inside your portfolio and realizing there's deals within deals. You know, look, we have an RV park, and you think about like we have this area that's a tent area that we're talking about turning into even just dry camping spots where people can pull their campers down there because it's high demand. $40-$50 a night is probably realistic. The pads that have full utilities go for anywhere from $75 to $100. Just that deal alone, the capital in versus the return is probably one of the greatest returns we could get. It's an amazing deal within a deal. And we don't have costs, but I mean, if they cost us $30,000 to put in some spots, which is probably close, and drives revenue $1,000 or $2 more per month in the summertime, I mean, the return is incredible. So I think looking inside the portfolio and finding deals inside of your own deals is extremely profitable.
And that example where you go in and there's like, you have to raise rents or you have to start bringing rents closer to market. I think Mitch or Gabe said something. Another problem is like, if you're not you have an ethical responsibility to keep up on raising rents, because people that listen to this might be like, oh, it's so mean to raise rents. Okay. But think about this. If you're not keeping up on rents, you're not investing in the property. You're not making it a clean, safe place to live. Right. And then also when you finally realize, like we did on that property, like we're $100 under rent, we cannot go raise rents $100 on somebody with a rent at $350 a pad. That's way too much. So now it's going to take a long time to catch up to market. Had we been diligent every year, keeping our rents up close to market or moving them closer to market and not as sluggish, and if we had taken ownership and responsibility of that, then we wouldn't be in this situation. It wouldn't be a large rent raise for our tenants to stock their system. but also we would have a lot more free cash flow to invest in the park, to add the playgrounds, to pave the roads, to fill the potholes. And we see that with a lot of landlords that maybe they own the park outright, they inherit it, or they've owned it for a long time, and they get close with their tenants, and they think raising rents is mean, right? It's not, I don't want to do this to my tenant, but in the long run, the property starts to spiral downhill from a maintenance perspective. You start getting, worse tenants in, where now it's dangerous. You can't maintain the property, and it either, like Mitch always says, properties are either spiraling up or spiraling down.
I think that when you look at the numbers, keeping up with market rate rents and raising rents allows investors to do a couple things. One thing, it allows you to profit and give returns to not only yourself potentially or investors. The second thing it allows you to do is to put capital into the property when is needed. And when you look at the numbers, a small rent raise allows for a large capital injection if needed. So for example, we've had properties where landlords think they're being nice, they subsidize rent, they keep rent really low. And because of that, they cannot fix anything. Sewer systems, culverts, roads. We had a park where sewers backed up into houses. In other words, you cannot put any capital into homes if you're not moving rents. And so I think the conversation around rents is really interesting. You think about a grocery store. The grocery store consistently gets products wholesale at higher prices. If they don't keep raising prices on their goods, they can't keep the bathrooms clean, they can't stock the aisles, they can't keep good employees. So it's no different than that. And so I think that it's really irresponsible to keep rents depressed because you're really not able to provide tenants a good place to live. So
you don't want to be fixing toilets. That's not lifestyle design. You're buying a job, but you're still an investor. You need to manage the assets. You need to make sure the net operating income's optimized. You need to make sure you're not losing occupancy. You need to make sure that your rents are appropriate. And you need to keep an eye on debt, right? Commercial real estate, it's not, you get debt for 30 years like a house. These things, debt, you have balloon payments, you need to refinance or sell in 5 to 10 years usually. So you definitely got to be, you got to be responsible there. Mitch and I, we're whirling whirls. So we're always making mistakes and learning and trying to improve. Gabe's a little closer to perfection than we are, but Gabe, any ahas, or I shouldn't say ahas, any lessons learned for you in 2024 as you reflect back on your journey, and that you could, I always like asking questions like this because people that are listening could probably benefit from people that are maybe a little further along that are, you look at people like us and think we've got it all figured out, but yeah, man, at least I don't, never will. Any lessons learned for you?
Yeah, a lot of lessons learned for me. I had, my first deal, my most challenging property in the 20 years of investing in 2024. I ended up in a partnership that didn't go well, that was very costly, that was, financially and emotionally taxing. It was a situation where I was a minority owner in the property, and I really don't think I kept as good of eyes on, right? I wanted to be, and I chose to be not as hands off, but more or less eyes off too. In 22 and 23, I was looking for strategic partnerships. So, but I think it's also, I was asked the question hey, if you were to do it again, would you have done the deal? And I'm like, well, of course not. But then the pushback I got was well, yeah, but what if it would have gone all right? Would you still be saying you wouldn't have done the deal? Right? Because a lot of the other deals that I did and a couple other partnerships that I chose to do have gone really well. And so, I think it's I've gone a lot of years without getting kicked in the balls, and so at some point it's bound to happen. Now, when there's a problem, it's important to all right, what's the solution, right? And so in real estate, you're gonna have things come up. And I've said this before. Thankfully, because I own real estate, I'm in a better position to solve some of these problems, both from a time in the saddle and some emotional intelligence of hey, I've been doing this a while. I know where the solutions lie. And also because I own real estate, I have the financial ability to solve some of these problems. So, I think with this particular partnership, the partner, the one that was leading the deal, didn't have any money in the deal. I think that was a first red flag. I didn't go out to the property till shit started hitting the fan. And so there's a lot of little things I could have done. And also looking back, I didn't need to be in that deal. I didn't need to do that deal, right? And so I think I could have been, a little more picky about who and what I partnered on. But at the same time, at that time, I was looking for partnerships, and so I care less about I never wanted to, I shouldn't have done that. I should have done that because it already happened. My mindset more goes, hey, what did I learn? I could vet the partners better. I could vet the deal better. I could make sure the partner has skin in the game, talk to more people. I mean, there's a lot to learn, but I think when it really comes down to don't be doing deals just to do fucking deals. Make sure it still fits within your, what you want in your life. And, in this particular case, there's some due diligence things I could have done and should have done. At the end of the day, I believe in the big boy clause. I'm a grown ass adult. I chose to do the deal, and I don't blame anyone but myself. And I'll be a better investor because of it. A lot of good stuff happened too. I've had other partnerships in 22 and 23 that have they've been phenomenal deals.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, I wonder what you're talking about. I think I can relate to what this deal, because for anybody who's been following us, I also invested with these guys, 200 units I own in the same city. And I was with you when I was about a year ahead of you when I flew out there to my properties. And then I crawled under, I crawled and hid myself and sucked my thumb and cried for a while, and then got to work and went into problem solving mode. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It's been a long, painful journey. Mitch knows this for us. These guys are incompetent and downright criminal in a way. But I'll tell you this. One thing that it gave me is, yes, I've learned lots of lessons, how to vet operators. I've learned a heck of a lot about C-class multifamily, that's for sure. Learn how to vet contractors, how to get the right team in place, the right asset managers in place to fix problems. I could go on and on about lessons learned, but probably more than anything, I think it's improved my mindset. And there's things that happened in my life prior to this, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're a real estate investor, shit's going to happen. It's going to get stressful. You're going to lose money. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be things that happen. And if that happened to a first-time investor, they're going to stroke out on some of the things that I've been through, But I've had really challenging times in my entrepreneurial journey or my real estate investing journey. So I had the mindset to actually meet the demand, stop panicking, go into problem-solving mode, getting the right people in place, and pushing forward. Now, hopefully I don't run into this particular situation again, my gosh, but also it's sort of hardens you a little bit. You just kind of if something happens in the future where, oh my gosh, someone's running around in their tighty whities with a machete. You're just yeah, that's just a Saturday, right? I the people in place to handle, but whereas a first time investor might be panicking and freaking out, and adversity makes you stronger, man, makes you more savvy, and it's a good thing. So it happens for you, not to you. So I love that. Mitch, do you have any? I know you and I was talking about looking at properties and just realizing that we kind of took our eye off the ball on some of these things, and now we have to fix them financially. Any other ahas for you besides just how great of a business partner I am and how much you appreciate me? And
well, I'll tell you, I am very glad to be back. Travis and I have had a couple of days together. They've gone well, I would say. Well, not great, not terrible. So the verdict's still out. No, I'm joking. I really appreciate jumping in with you, Trav. I'm really excited. I think last year was a tough year. Oh, it was a tough year for me for a lot of different reasons. A lot of personal stuff on my wife's family side with some health things. I think I learned a lot. I mean, one of the things is when the personal side is hard, it's really hard to be abundant. And so I've had a lot of a challenge with abundance this last year. I would say more scarcity in this last year than abundance, because I think that, you just get in this mindset, not the sky is falling, but it's a bit of negativity. And so I've learned about myself in a way where I'm I gotta really, the emotional strength when personal side goes down. I think I lack some of that. And so, but that's part of life, right? We go through these ebbs and flows, the troughs, and they're tough. And so I'm excited for this year. I feel like the momentum is in the right direction. The other thing I learned, I was reading, this is kind of totally different, but I was reading this book the other day by Manish Pabrai. He runs a pretty large fund, a stock fund. We don't talk a lot about stocks, but in the end, stocks are businesses, right? So are pieces of businesses. And the way Manish Pabrai, I would recommend this book. I think it's called The Dondu Investor. It's a hard word to say. I think I'm saying it right, but Dondu Investor. He really laid out a thesis for investing and making asymmetric bets that I thought was really interesting. And he's basically a student of Warren Buffett. But one of the things that really struck me, he said, look, you're only going to have probably 20, I think he said about 20 amazing opportunities in your life when you're an investor. And he's talking about stocks, but I think you could probably say maybe the same thing with real estate. And one of the things he said was like, when you have a really great opportunity and there's very little downside and a lot of upside, make sure you're really, really going all in on that. And I think one of my mistakes last year is we had a deal in Wisconsin that's like a home run deal, great deal. And I went in with a little bit of cash. And I think it's a combination of a scarcity mindset and really not like understanding the opportunity I had before me. And I think Travis did the same thing. Both of us a minority. We look back going, man, we knew that was a home run. And we both went in with a minority of cash. That could have been extremely, maybe 3 or 4 times more impactful. And so Monish's argument is, look, there's only so many opportunities. And I don't want to say that in a negative way, but like thinking about deals out there, when you've got a great deal with very obvious little downside and a lot of upside, he makes the argument that you really need to go in hard and make sure you're investing an impactful amount of money. And so anyway, just a lesson learned, kind of random, but I thought it was a really, really good read, the way he looks at businesses, and we can learn a lot from him.
Scarcity mindset will lose you millions and millions of dollars. Like when you're in a scarcity mindset, I know that deal you're talking about, and we're like, oh, we're going to raise capital. We'll put our own capital in, but not as much. And I'm the same way. I'm like, why wouldn't I go all in as much as I can on that? Because every dollar I put in is going to double in equity in 12 months. So yeah, it's frustrating.
I think the mindset stuff is so important, and people underestimate it all the time. It's like where our thoughts go, our actions go. Like, we think something, we speak something, we start believing something, we take actions towards those things, and I think it's a little bit of a practice, right? But it's also like, if you can understand that there's a lot that's in our control, and there's also a lot that's out of our control. But oftentimes, and I think, this relates outside of investing as well, but oftentimes we're thinking in terms of like, what if this happens? What if that happens? It's like the worst case scenario type stuff, where in most cases that never happens. But I also see most had very little benefit to focus your energy on all the like horrible worst case scenario shit. And I think about those early days of investing where I had so many people say, well, what if this? And what if that? And what if prices drop? And what if interest rates go up? And what if tenants destroy the house? And what if you lose all your money? And like, if an airplane crashes into your face, like, all this just like shit that probably won't happen. But even if some of that stuff does happen, bringing it back to real estate, like owning the fucking real estate puts you in a better position. You own assets, right? And so like, yeah, tenants have destroyed my places. I had a tenant-owned mobile home burned down the other day. There's a lot of it's out of my control. And this, stressing on the what ifs of what can happen. Now, I think you need to be at a place of like understanding the things that could come up in real estate that can happen, right? But I think also like if that's where your focus is, like you could talk yourself out of every single possible real estate deal. I've never bought a property that I could have found some reason to talk myself out of, but it's oftentimes there's a lot greater reasons to buy that piece of real estate or invest in that deal.
Well, I think a lot of people look at a property and they go, well, there's a risk of this or this or this, and they stack the risks, and then they say no, they walk away from it. And we see new investors do this a lot. I think the best investors really understand how to weigh the downside risk as well as calculate the potential upside risk, and then make an educated decision. Because every property, even a home run property, has inherent risk, but it's balancing risk and reward and taking opportunities where it's highly weighted on the reward side.
And a lot of times a great opportunity comes out of a challenging situation as well.
Oh man, I can't say that more. I mean, a great example of that, Gabe, is just the relationships I've made. So again, I'm about a year ahead of you in Oklahoma City on these properties. And I was almost in tears because I was in such bad shape with these. And my wife was like, hey, like, stop crying, get into problem solving mode. Like, and then it's like, who's your who? You got to find your who. She was like, hold on, hold my beer. I got a contact for you. She connected me with the guys over at Coast who are amazing. JT was at our elite mastermind, in-person physical mastermind and Scottsdale, their apartment syndicators. They did great guys, honest, integrity. And so I brought those guys in and they ran the construction. I was getting destroyed. These contractors are just robbing me blind because I'm not a contractor and I'm 2,000 miles away and it's 200 units that I have to turn. So they got in and got all the contractors lined up, fired one, hired another one. One of the ones they hired, Marlon, who we love, who's done the work on your complex, my complex. They did a fantastic job. They turned all the units and then they came in and helped me get good on-site management in place. Now they're managing the managers. Well, not only did they turn the property around, but these are guys that I'm now investing with on the apartment syndication side. You know, they'll probably invest with us. It's just a much closer relationship. So that connection came out of duress with this property. And it all comes down to like, so the lessons learned are obviously be careful who you invest with, but then when there is a problem, and there most inevitably will be, this isn't like what people see on social media where they're just running to the bank and driving Lambos and cashing checks. Like, this is the real world. There's problems. But the benefit out of that came, like, first of all, ask who's your who's going to fix this? And the same thing with this hotel that Mitch and I own, where there's a challenge. Like, okay, if it's like the question that you have to ask yourself is who's your who's going to help you fix this, right? It's not you, it's somebody else. And then out of that who came a great relationship. So, and it always comes down to the questions you ask yourself. And usually the answers that come out of those questions can be life-changing or certainly impact your real estate scale journey.
I love that. I think too, some of the best, we talked about before, some of the best investments we've made is when we have like no money. Like I always go back to our first 3 or 4 properties we bought. Those are like the best deals we made when we didn't have any money. And I think the same can be true for when your back's against the wall. Some of the best decisions, some of the best relationships, some of the best momentum comes out of really, really hard and tough times because you're forced to take action. You're forced to get out there, build relationships. You're forced to like figure it out. And so I think we're all human. I mean, at least for me, when everything's going well and I'm getting paid and I'm a little bit soft and then I got a full bank account, I'm usually not making the best investments or the best relationships. I actually think, and this is why I love to go play like I don't have any money in the bank. I love to like try to get in that mindset because I think that's where you go get momentum. So there's good things that can come from tough situations.
I would sit on a pile of cash when I invest in these guys. I'm like, sure, yeah, let's try this. The way these deals were structured, not only where we sit, yeah, you could lose the money you put into the deal, but this was a JV deal and we were all in the note. So like, there's a much bigger downside. It was an asymmetrical bet in the wrong way. Mitch always say like, oh, you can make $1 million, but you downsize, you lose $100,000. Okay. Those are bets that I'd be interested in potentially taking. But this was like, you can make a couple $100,000 and, be on the hook for millions.
I read about a lot of really successful investors, the Zells of the world. These guys, even like Cushman talked about some of his early mistakes he's made. Like the best of investors are still going to hit at 90%, 80%, 70%. There's always challenges inside of a portfolio. And if you think it's indifferent, then you're not human. And so there's absolutely no investor that doesn't, because we're accepting risk, downside will happen to all of us. It's just how many deals have you captured the upside and the reward? And you guys have captured so much of that you're able to weather this storm. And I think that's the thesis, right?
Yeah, I agree. Any big wins though that came out of last year that are top of mind for you guys that we can share with our audience that maybe they can learn from?
I think the biggest win when I reflect back and it sounds crazy, but it's the lessons learned from the biggest challenge that I had, which was with my property in Oklahoma City. And it's because I feel like I took the time to reflect and go, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? But it also put me in a position where we've said this so many times, even on this, on this podcast, I identified the problem and I had to identify the solution. And this involved reaching out to my network. It involved building new relationships. I ended up refinancing that property and working with a lender who was a friend of the local lender that I use here, right? And so it created opportunities for new relationships. You talked about JT, you talked about Marlin, the contractor. I named my building after Marlin. It's called the Marlin. And so out of these challenging times, there were a lot of learning opportunities that I feel like I'm actually better equipped for the next 20 years of investing because of that experience. Other lessons, and kind of like we've talked about a bit on this podcast episode, is looking inside my current portfolio and where can I, maximize my returns, increase my NOI, decrease expenses within my own portfolio. And that's something I've done in the past, but not in as much detail as I'm doing now. I've kind of looked at not so much on my smaller stuff, but like within my mobile home park communities, like I'm looking at, okay, what can I do within this particular property to potentially decrease expenses and increase revenue? And so I think when I really look back on 24, a lot of good stuff. All my other properties are performing really well, with the exception of one of my parks also has a septic challenge, but it's actually turned into this really cool opportunity to develop the land into something really, really beautiful, which, I don't think we have time to get into on this podcast episode. But again, the challenge creates an opportunity for something really amazing. And so in some ways, 24 on the real estate side has been both challenging and fruitful. And I think some of that is just the perspective I choose to look at that.
I think the biggest one for me is on the personal side. You guys all know my wife's brother got sick and he passed away, I think in early June. We were able to get there as fast as we could after diagnosis and be with him during his last months. And like, I look back and I realize like real estate's giving me that. It's giving me that freedom. I would say I had a slow year last year, focus on family, so focus on personal stuff. But like without that, I would hate to look back and say, look, we couldn't have been there. And so for me, I think success is when you're 80 or 90 or whatever I get to live to, and you look back and you go, hey man, I don't have any regrets. And I think that would have been a huge regret if we couldn't be there. So that was the biggest win. I would say it was a non-financial win, more of a personal win, but real estate again has given me that option when most would not have that option. And so I go right back to real estate as like the one thing in my life that allows me the freedom, the flexibility, allows me to turn it off and go invest in family. So I would say that's the 24 win.
Mitch, I love here. I mean, it gives me the chills. I mean, I know it was a challenging year personally, but it gives me the chills because I think for one, real estate has allowed you to focus your time and energy on the things that actually matter in life. And, I was in a scenario, it's, when my dad passed away 7 years ago, it's like I didn't have to choose between going to work or being with my dad. And I know, this is your wife's brother. And on a whim, you could say, all right, we're out. This is important. And you have the time freedom and financial freedom to do that. I think it really, really puts in perspective, on why we're so passionate about time freedom, because it's not only about doing the cool stuff. And I know for me, when I can spend that time with my dad, it gave me even higher appreciation for the financial and time freedom I had in my life because I got to go spend it with my loved ones. And I know you just experienced that, this last year, and you can say, I know I'll look back on this time and have no regrets because I put myself in a position to support my wife and my family and go be there.
I would say probably my biggest win, because, nobody asked me, but I'll answer anyway. My biggest win was getting open mistake done. Just getting that thing done, getting those things, getting those occupied, looking at the rent roll and seeing 98% occupied, 95% occupied, 95% collections, right? When you'd look at like 30% occupied, 20% occupied, and you're wiring funds every single month. So yeah, that's a big win. Plus we took down some good properties. So yeah, all in all, 2024 was good. I think 2025 or just play sniper, keep looking for good deals, and keep growing the tribe. We bring more elites into the family and high five their success. There's nothing more exciting than that. I guess last question for you guys. This is such a cliche question for podcasts, and I know the answer is gonna be like, hell, I don't know, just buy good deals. So I agree with that. A lot of people they want to talk about interest rates and the Feds and markets and apartment syndications and whatever the case is. In Gabe's points, he's just like, it doesn't really matter. There's deals everywhere, right? In one of the highest interest rate environments for several years, several decades, so to speak. Right now, when we're recording this, Mitch and I went and found some really great deals. One was actually traditional bank financed. That'll be $1 million up in the end of 12 months. The other was an owner contract at 6% interest only, which is a great deal. That was the one in Wisconsin. So you can always find deals. You can always scale. People that use the macro market as that's an excuse. But yes, I'll level set that. I absolutely agree. There's always a good time to invest. But beyond that, do you guys have any predictions for the commercial real estate world for 2025? Interest rates, supply, demand, et cetera, asset classes. Any thoughts around that before we get out of here?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you often hear people say like, oh, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what, I can't predict it, but I do have a crystal ball and I do know what prices are going to do and interest rates. And so, thank God somebody got that crystal ball on this.
I love this.
Prices will go up and they will go down and they'll stay stagnant throughout all time. Interest rates will go up and they will go down and they'll stay the same. And that brings me back to your point, Travis. Yes, I think it's always a good time to buy if you buy right.
Gabe, you're 100% right. They're going to go up, down, and stay the same. I think that the biggest thing investors, whether you're new or you've been in the game for a while, really, really hone in on the fundamentals of real estate. You can buy an asset with 5% interest or 15% interest or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you understand the fundamentals of real estate and the deal works, then the deal can work for a long time. It can make you a lot of money. And so the fundamentals, that's really understanding the profit loss, the rent roll, how to look at properties, how to perform due diligence, how to understand cash on cash and IRR and debt service and DSCR, all of those things, like it all comes back to that in my opinion, and that allows you to go get wins in any market. And so I won't predict things, but I will just say, if you're starting in the game of real estate, get your head away from predicting or trying to time the market and really, really focus on fundamentals.
That's a good point. I also, think there are some unknowns, and I think whether you like them or not, and regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, we're about to get a real estate investor back in office. I know Trump wants to turn Greenland rather, as part of the U.S. and possibly Canada as well, right? So they sound like crazy ideas, but with the real estate investor back in office, like we could see some interesting changes and laws and things that could benefit a lot of investors. And so a lot of crazy things are said and not always done. But I think, keeping your eyes open and paying attention to the changes, not just in the local market, but also nationally and internationally, because, there's going to be winners and there's going to be people that feel like they're not winning, but paying attention, and I don't mean paying attention to the news, but paying attention to the local market and, the real estate markets that you're investing in to see where those changes come. Sometimes it's zoning. Sometimes it's just laws. Sometimes it's, it could be getting rid of the 1031 or bringing back 100% accelerated bonus appreciation. So taking advantages regardless of what you believe to think or what side political aisle, as things change, make sure you're taking full benefit of those things that are in your favor as a real estate investor.
That's such a good point. We've had some people on this podcast that are investing in blue states like Portland, Oregon, Southern California. Maybe it's not a good time to talk about Southern California right now, but generally speaking, by the way, our thoughts and prayers are with those guys, the families in
Absolutely.
Southern California. It's awful. But the point of making those, there is, like to Gabe's point, there's there's land use laws that are coming out. They need housing, right? So much zoning has been in place to where they don't want high density housing, right? They want a house on a 1 acre lot. Well, now they need housing. They need supply. And so they've changed the zoning to where you can build ADUs on your land. And so we've got people on this podcast that have having phenomenal success doing this and adding units and making a lot of money in blue states. So to Gabe's point, they're paying attention to opportunities. By the way, I see that opportunity in our hometown here in Hood River, Oregon for Mitch and I. Also, like another, and again, I'm not a prediction guy either. I have no idea, zero idea what's going to happen to rates. I hope they come down. Sure. If they don't, will we be okay? Yeah. Will we endure? For sure. Are we under leverage on our properties? Do we have healthy cash flow? Yes. Will it not be as much cash flow? Will there be less opportunity to harvest equity? Maybe. But at the end of the day, real estate cures itself over time. Even these properties in Oklahoma City, they're going to be wins over time. People will look at it and be like, wow, that was a home run. But like, no, it was just real estate, right? And so I do agree with that. It's interesting. I did, in fact, our buddies over at Coast, JT at Coast sent over, there's a guy that's an apartment economist, which I thought, how niche is that? Apartment economist. No, without getting into the details, one of the things they did mention is that in most municipalities across the country, there is going to be pre-pandemic and even before shortages of housing, right? You think about it coming out of 2008, they weren't building housing. In this last, there's some markets that they overbuild. I think Austin's one of them and some others. But even Austin, they said, is going to go back into sort of a deficit on supply here really soon. And they weren't building, a lot of builders aren't building in this high interest rate environment. So it goes to show, and this is also kind of sad, like home ownership is going to be less and less of a thing for younger generations coming up, right? They're going to be more and more renters. The cost of real estate is going up. It's a finite resource. So buying assets that you can rent, maybe specifically in landlord friendly states is helpful. Gives you flexibility. So I think there will be a supply shortage. Now, do I know that? Are they going to figure that out and overcome that? Maybe. I don't know. I'm certainly not going to bet my future on it, but it just sort of tracks the general trend of real estate. It's going up into the right in value, and generally speaking, it's a finite resource. They're not making more of it. So it's a good place to be. I don't know. We're a little biased. We love real estate. My last prediction for 2025 is it's going to be it's going to be a badass year. It's going to be great. Whether we're buying stuff or not, or we're optimizing our properties or not, it's going to be I just know, at my cellular level, it's going to be a fantastic year. And I'm projecting that out to everybody I talk to, including you two, and the 100 million listeners that we have with this podcast.